The Iraq War was an armed conflict between the United States of America and, obviously, Iraq. It was mainly developed between 2003 and 2011, but there are still US troops in Iraq and tensions haven't decreased yet.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
In brief moments, we will see another US President George W. Bush speech about the Iraq War.
Americans, today I stand before you to address the nation. Lately, we have seen good times, but we haven't forgotten. At this point, our intelligence has brought upon us an unequivocal evidence that there are threats developing that put in risk our security, and for that, many American lives. Not only that, but it is also risking global peace and human rights. We have received notice that the Iraqi government, the same that hosts the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda, responsible for the infamous 9/11 attacks, as well as many others around the world, is now in the production, by order of the dictator Saddam Hussein, of biological and mass destruction weapons. The American people must not tolerate a threat of such magnitude. For that, I present, after a very rough evaluation and a verdict of a hard decision that I trust you will agree with, an intervention to preserve the national security we have enjoyed up until now is a must. With that, I'm officially announcing an operation to intervene in Iraq, dethrone Hussein and the terrorists, bringing peace and security not only for America, but for the world.
This intervention is not necessary. It will create more tensions in the Middle East and will not make the world more peaceful at all. Instead, the opposite will happen. Many Muslims will be radicalized to oppose the US, and the power vacuum left in Iraq will allow for terrorist groups to grow.
You don't seem to understand. This intervention is necessary to save the security of both American lives and the whole world from the evil regime of Saddam Hussein. Without this intervention, Saddam Hussein will continue developing weapons of mass destruction to possibly carry out attacks on the world.
You have no solid evidence of Saddam Hussein developing weapons of mass destruction. Those images you showed at the United Nations are so blatantly false, everyone will notice.
Even if that were to be true, this would have been a primitive intervention to avoid him from doing so in the future and free the Iraqi people.
This whole preemptive war thing makes no sense. You believe your opponent will attack you, so you become the villain yourself by attacking first.
We're not villains. We're defending world freedom and security. We don't need your help anyway. If you don't want to collaborate with us, you're helping terrorists. And we will carry out an anti-France public relation campaign. French fries will now be freedom fries in the free world.
I warn you, this war will backfire against you. You'll see, this will be the next Vietnam.
Time will prove you wrong.
The relationship between the US and Iraq can be traced back to the creation of Iraq by the British in 1921, in a territory inhabited by various ethnic and religious groups that often conflicted with each other. In 1968, a coup resulted in a new socialist pan-Arab government with an ideology called Ba'athist. This government sought close relations with the USSR and was distant towards the US, but what led to the war itself has its origins by the late 70s to early 90s. The beginning can be alluded to the arrival of Communist Soviet forces to Afghanistan in 1979, introducing communism to the Middle East during the Cold War. The invasion turned the eye of the United States to the already socialist government that resided inside Iraqi territory, in which that same year newly elected Iraqi President Saddam Hussein had taken power of the government. First, the Americans seemed supportive of Iraq, as in the early 80s with Iraq launching a full invasion on Iran. By 1982, the US government saw it as a way to contain Iran expansionism when the war reached stalemate, being the same year that the US shifted from neutrality to support for Iraq, sharing intelligence and escorting oil tankers to their destination as early as 1987, until the eventual ceasefire of the war in 1988. With that, and the US-Soviet relationship looking better, fear of communism in the Middle East started to dissipate. They hoped to introduce the region to an era of prosperity and peace with the foundation of Hussein's government, making a blind eye of his inside policy in favor of a good relationship. Relationships started to shift as in the 90s, Hussein, looking for oil deposits, threatened to take Kuwait, a little region neighboring Iraqi territory. The invasion went against the US interest. Therefore, President at the time, George Bush, tried to deter Hussein with economic incentives, using the good relationship built in the 80s. This didn't work as expected, with both parties moving armed forces into the border of Kuwait. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait with ease, putting the first cracks into the US-Iraqi relationship, with the US now fearing Iraqi expansionism. For that, the US and its allies launched an operation to push back Iraqi forces off of Kuwait, further damaging their relationship, opening the path to a containment policy used then forward by the US. In 1998, Osama bin Laden, leader of Al-Qaeda, an organization hosting Iraq, declared the war on the United States, using as a motive the attacks on Iraqi air bases in Saudi Arabia. This eventually led to the attacks of the Twin Towers on September 11, 2001, itself linked to the classification of Hussein's government as a threat to the US security, by allowing the group to develop within its borders without consequences or prosecution. Finally, on March 20th, 2003, the US announced the invasion of Iraq, after the intelligence allegedly found evidence of the production of biological and mass murder weapons.
In brief moments, we will present to you a brief timeline about the war. In 2003, the US and British and other co-ally forces quickly overwhelmed the Iraqi army, though elements loyal to Hussein formed the core of a post-war insurgency to fight on. On May 1st, the US led forces to complete control over Iraq. President Bush gave the controversial Mission Accomplished speech in which he misleadingly declared combat in Iraq had ended. On the 23rd, the Iraqi army was officially disbanded, sending armed men into the streets who would later cause chaos. In December, US forces located and captured Saddam Hussein hiding in Tikrit. 2004. In January 2004, the US government admitted that their intelligence did not find any of the alleged stockpiles of chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons described in the pre-war reports, sparking global controversy about the invasion. This same year, Al-Qaeda started a wave of violence around the Iraqi territory that affects equally between civilians and military. 2005. The year 2005 marked the elections in Iraq since Saddam Hussein took power in 1979. They were also the first held under the new constitution. 2006. In 2006, a new wave of violence emerged, this time by the extreme Muslim groups. On November 5th, former dictator Saddam Hussein is held in court, receiving a sentence of death by hanging after being found guilty of crimes against humanity. He was publicly executed on December 30th of the same year. In the US side, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, a major advocate for the war, resigns on his duty. 2007. 2007 marked the year of progress in which US forces assumed control to maintain the peace. As a part of the New Way Forward plan, they started to recruit and train Sunni tribe members to fight against extremist groups, AQI, eventually forming a coalition with the Sunnis. In December, Allied forces started to relinquish control over the cities to the newly formed Iraqi forces, trusting over the security of them. 2008. In 2008, the efforts to continue the handover of territory continued. This time it will be Anbar. Once one of the most rebel regions of all Iraq, being passed on to the Iraqi people. This move is seen as the first step to the eventual US and Allies withdrawal of the country. On American soil, Barack Obama takes over the presidency of the nation, promising to start a campaign to withdraw over Iraq within 16 months. 2009. 2009 marks the start of the official withdrawal by June. Around 150 bases and outposts had been shut down. The US also implemented training to advise Iraqi forces on security. 2010. On March 7, 2010, elections were held for the newly installed Iraqi parliament. The country suffered attacks while the elections took place, but Iraqi forces were able to keep the peace. In August of the same year, the United States officially declared that the combat had ended. 2011. Finally, on October 1st of the same year, President of the US at the time, Barack Obama, announced that the war is officially over and all of the remaining troops will be withdrawn by the end of the year.
Across America, our servicemen and women will be reunited with their families. Today, I can say that our troops in Iraq will definitely be home for the holidays. This December will be a time to reflect on all that we've been through in this war. I'll join the American people in paying tribute to the more than 1 million Americans who have served in Iraq. We'll honor our many wounded warriors and the nearly 4,500 American patriots and their Iraqi and coalition partners who gave their lives to this effort.
To this day, almost 21 years later after the invasion, Iraq is widely considered as a fragile and politically unstable state. The Iraqi population mostly considers their current government to be corrupt. This conflict completely changed the identity of the country, establishing a new government and forever changing the culture of the Iraqi people in all areas. For better or for worse, we can conclude Iraq is a completely different country than it was 20 years ago in several ways. The Iraq War transformed Iraq from a totalitarian socialist sunny state into a fragile, capitalist, multi-sectarian one. And as always, my friends, remember, this is just a project. A monthly project. Thank you for watching.